What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about a Scream video game, my pitch for it, my idea for it, and also if it makes sense, if it would work, kind of look at other examples of other games or other movies and go from there. Now, I did something similar to this last year, but actually, ironically, between last year, Scream 5, and now this year, Scream 6, we've actually gotten a couple things. There's, I would say, more evidence to support the idea of a Scream game being possible, right? Something like this actually being a possibility to happen. So the first thing is the success of the franchise, the continued success, right? So, last year you have Scream 5. Now you just have Scream 5. Scream 5 was a success. People liked it. There were people that didn't like it, and that's totally cool. But overwhelmingly, I think you can say, right, it brought the franchise back. I think that's the thing you can say safely. It made money. It made a lot of money. It revitalized the franchise. You get a Scream 6. We know we're going to get a Scream 7, all that jazz, okay? Scream is back, and in some ways, it's stronger. Maybe not better, but it's stronger than it ever was. A lot of that, I guess, was from Scream 5, but now we're at Scream 6, and guess what? Scream 6 is an even bigger success. It's made more money than Scream 5. It had a bigger budget, but just barely. So ultimately, it's going to make even more money, okay? So at the end of the day, this franchise is strong, very strong, and it's only gotten stronger in the last year. So I guess if you're an executive, if you're one of these suit people, and you're saying, okay, well, what do we do? Do we make a Scream game? You could say, well, sir, it's only gotten more profitable. This franchise is only getting bigger as these years go on. Okay, well, maybe that helps, right? So you had that. On top of it, I do believe this has happened over the last year, Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Now, why do I bring up this oddity? Well, because it's getting a game. So I think this was last summer. I think this was around Summer Game Fest. I think last June when they announced this game. Could be wrong. Maybe it was like Gamescom. Maybe it was in August. It was last summer. It was after Scream 5. So look, I've been high and mighty on this little throne of mine saying, make a Scream game. Please, for the love of God, it would work. We already have games like Predator. We have games like Friday the 13th. I mean, it works. You have the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game, which actually comes out this year in August. They're all multiplayer, and I'll talk about that in a second. But you're having this renaissance of not just horror movies, but these horror icons being in games, okay? We're having all of them all over the place. All right, well, that's already, I think, a good enough excuse to have a Scream game. I think immediately when you tell me there's a Texas Chainsaw game coming out, or Predator, or Friday, or whatever, it's like, all right, I think Scream fits. I think Scream would make just as much money as those games, especially if done right. I think it could make more, to be honest with you. So, okay, that's all fine and good. Well, last summer, we had the Killer Clowns from Outer Space game being announced. I think it's supposed to come out this year, or at least there's going to be a beta this year. It's a 3v7 which is a very odd number, by the way, for multiplayer games, but 3v7 multiplayer game. All right, this is where, number one, I'm excited for this game, and I'm like, anytime these kind of games come out, I say, all right, this is going to be pretty exciting. Evil Dead, I really liked that game. Normally, they're pretty okay. I like the multiplayer experience. They give me something to talk about on the channel, so I'm all in, okay? I'm good with that. But when you tell me that a game that, yes, has become like a cult classic, there's no doubt about it, and people do genuinely like this movie and have supported it, throughout the years and all that stuff. But when you tell me that Killer Clowns from Outer Space, an obscure film from decades and decades and decades ago, is getting a video game, before you tell me that a Scream game is getting a video game, I lose my mind. And honestly, that is what happened. I am both equally excited, and I've been covering it, and I will cover Killer Clowns, going forward. Texas Chainsaw looks incredible, and I can't wait for that game. I will cover these games, but I will also be a little ticked off that these properties think that they deserve a video game more than Scream does. Now, ultimately and honestly, that's not how it works, right? I don't even know the legal kind of jump throughs that you have to go through to get something like this off the ground. I do think, honestly, like the idea of Ghostface, I think that itself could be an issue. You look at even like Dead by Daylight, they had to go through just like not Scream, but just the actual costume, right? Because there's that separation. I think people know that story quite well, right? Like RJ kind of being separate. That's a real thing. That's something that, I don't know, are those hoops that people have to jump through? Is that what is preventing it? Because you kind of have to make a deal with him to get the suit and the mask and for Ghostface. And then you also have to go to Paramount or Spot or whatever. I don't even know who you have to go through nowadays. You go to them and you say, hey, can you agree on licensing out Scream? So this is where we start to, I guess, get to the problems. But I would just like to say, a lot of these properties have had legal issues, right? Like Friday the 13th, that game had legal issues. That game had so many legal issues that once the game came out, they were not legally allowed to add in like new content, new DL, like new maps, new skins for J. They were not allowed to do that. They could fix the game, patch it, have things like that, but they couldn't actually add more because of the legal trouble. It could be why there's so few of these games, because they're just a pain to actually have to, dance through all this stuff to get it to work. But let me tell you, I think a Scream game would work. I think a Scream game, if I just told you that we've had games for Evil Dead, Texas Chainsaw, Friday the 13th, Predator, Killer Clowns, if I just led with that, I think that'd be a pretty okay argument to say, what's another kind of icon? What's a franchise that historically has done really well and very much in line, maybe better than some, maybe worse than others, but still in line with that group? Scream. So I think right there's already enough to go based off, especially with Killer Clowns, where it's like, if you're going to give me that and you can't give me Scream, I don't know what the issue is. I think that's enough. Now, in terms of what Scream actually should be, well, I got a couple ideas. I've pitched this before here and there, but let's put it all, in one little thing in this video. So for me, I would not do multiplayer. And that maybe is very controversial right off the jump, but I've been very headstrong even when I pitched this last year. Do not do multiplayer. Would I take a multiplayer Scream game? Of course I would. I'd be the #1 backer of it on YouTube, I promise. Okay? I'd be right there. I'd support it. I'd talk. Not, I wouldn't kiss up to it. It would have to be good, but I would definitely support the thing. I wouldn't turn my back on it just because it's multiplayer. But I think this is actually a thing. All these horror games, well, because they're all going for, the multiplayer stuff, I think there's probably a reason, right? You want these games to stay around. You want that interaction with your friends. Horror, I think, generally is more of like a community thing. I think we've realized that with Scream specifically, but other horror franchises as well. I think there's something special to seeing a horror film with others, talking about a horror film with others. I think there's something there, legitimately. So I get the idea that to play a horror game with your friends and all that stuff, that may make a lot of sense. All right, fine. However, I think it's not oversaturated, but yet again, in a way, maybe it is. I think there's too many of these games, and they're all doing the same thing. You play as the killers, and then you play as the survivors. Now, they do it differently each time. Scream, where I think it makes the most sense, is to tell a story. I think the story of Scream has always been extremely good, and while I don't have, and I've been very open and honest with this, I'm not into a lot of other horror films or franchises. I just don't care. It's not that I necessarily hate them. I just truly could care less. So maybe I can't speak fully on the quality of, individual aspects, but I'll go off on a limb to say that I feel the story of Scream is extremely strong. The characters, Ghostface, the voice Roger, his voice, but also just the acting in general, taking itself seriously while also having meta and also, having jokes. I think it does it, well, in my opinion, better than almost anything, but it's because I'm a fan of it, and I don't really watch the other things. But I think Scream positioned itself perfectly to do that as a game. Why would you do multiplayer? It's a hack and yeah, it would work because you'd play as Ghostface and you'd play as survivors, and Ghostface would go around and terrorize and attack the survivors. But yet again, we do that in all of them. And Scream has such a awesome, the idea of a whodunit. Who is Ghostface? Who is under the mask? So my immediate pitch for this game would be a story, a single player game, and you could do it a couple of different ways. Honestly, if you want to just tell me a story and just play straight through it, you can do it. I think this game works perfectly with an interactive story. So I'm looking at Supermassive Games, who made Until Dawn, which Hayden Panettiere obviously was a part of. They also made The Quarry, which David Arquette was a part of. In their case, it's more lifelike, because I have another example where it's not so lifelike. You have the real actors, right? They go on set, they do the mocap, they do their thing. So you have that, but you also get to pick, right? So this is the big thing with these kind of games, is you pick what you would do in a certain situation. Now, there's never unlimited decisions. There's never a case where one decision truly would impact like everything, because ultimately you're on a path and the developers have to have a beginning, middle, end. One decision you make can't make 50 new ones, otherwise the game would never be complete, okay? There are limitations to this. Classically, there's limitations to this genre, but I think that works so well. Now, Telltale does pretty much the exact same thing, right? Now, they just don't do all horror. They do other things as well, but it's the same thing. This one's a little bit more animated. It's a little bit more like cartoonish. Walking Dead, Wolf Among Us, which is just a phenomenal game. Same idea. You're playing their story. They have a beginning, middle, and end, but at the same time, you're able to influence it at least a little bit. You get to pick the dialogue conversations that you have with other people. There'll be a couple big choices throughout the game that life or death will result in whatever you pick. Again, I think that in itself, the idea of kind of randomness works so well with Scream because you have the idea of potentially, say, you can pick who you think is Ghostface at the end. And you're right. Well, you're going to get like a unique cutscene. Something unique will happen. Now, at the end of the day, they'll still corner you. They'll still tell you their monologue. Like, there'll be stuff that happens. But you can choose to say, hey, I think it's you. And you can be right. And there'll be a cutscene for that. Or you can be wrong. And there'll be a cutscene for that as well. Maybe you make a couple decisions. Maybe the developers decide, okay, some of these characters, they're going to die no matter what. You can maybe have them die a certain way versus another way, but they're going to die. Maybe some of them you can save if you make the right calls throughout the game. I think that for a whodunit, a murder kind of mystery thing, I think that works absolutely amazing. And what you would do is you would play as the final girl. So I mean, I think that would work so well. You give us, it doesn't have to be literally like Scream 1 retold in a game. You don't have to play as Sydney or Sam or anything like that. Make a new character. The new final girl, right? Family. You could, I guess, have them be attached to the Prescotts or to the Loomises, whatever you wanted to do. You could do that, but you'd play as a unique character. I guess on the flip side, a wild idea would have us be playing as the killer. I think that'd be taking like the Scream formula and just doing something very, very wild with it, where you're still picking your options. You're still kind of dictating where the game goes based off you, but you're actually playing as the killer, so you get to make kind of conversations on the phone and stuff. I think you'd have a similar feel if you did it the reverse, right? Because imagine you're the final girl. You get like 3-4 calls from Ghostface throughout the game. So Ghostface is talking to you, you're talking back, and you get to pick the dialogue options that you would say back. I could say I think it works perfectly all day long because I'm a very confident person, but I really do think it's made for a single player game. I think multiplayer would work. To be honest with you, it's probably the approach a developer would take with this game. I don't know why, because I really think just an interactive story where you choose what happens. Obviously, certain things are going to happen no matter what, but it's a unique tale in Scream. You're playing as the final girl. You get confronted by Ghostface at the end. You defeat them, all that stuff. I think that would work so well. Maybe it's expensive to do something. I mean, I assume that's probably the main reason. It's a lot of money. It would take a lot of time. That's another thing, right? Like Scream is so popular now, but when you're making a game, games take, if you made a Scream game and you made it, say you started making it a few months ago, it's going to take about 3 to 5 years for that game to come out. To me, that's probably the biggest issue. That I do think a Scream game would work. I think it'd be profitable. I don't really think they'd lose money or anything like that. I think it'd be a very safe kind of bet. But if you're saying, well, Scream's so popular now, let's jump on it. Let's make a game. Well, it's going to take like 3, 4, 5 years. The movies, they'll still be popular and Scream will always still be around, but you'll be on that lull. They'll actually be in between, say, Scream 7 and then, the eventual Scream 8, let's say, right? So it would just be a bad time, but there's nothing you can do. That's kind of what you have to do. That's how game making works. So that would be my idea. I think that's much better said this year than it was last year. I think that's what they should do. It's what I would do. If you want to give me a boatload of money to make my own studio, I'll put together a team. It'll be the best team you've ever seen in your life, and we'll make a Scream game. But no, I think it would work, and I think that's how it should be done, to be honest with you. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure you guys are subscribed, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.